can let me know if you're able to see.
Yes.
Perfect.
Beautiful.
Great. So I'll start with some introductions, I guess. Again, thank you, Claire, for describing your partnership, your program, and inviting me to come and speak today. I'm really happy to be here. I was just saying before everybody else joined in, I'm in my makeshift office at home, in my little kitchen office. Got the sun shining, I've got my coffee, so I'm all cozy and ready to talk about mindful eating with you all. So I am a registered dietitian, and Claire asked me to come and talk to you guys today. She reached out a couple of weeks or months ago, can't remember anymore now, and we decided that this would be a very accurate topic to talk about. So just a bit about me. I graduated from the University of Moncton with a Bachelor's of Science in Nutrition. So I am in Moncton right now. And I tiptoed in different areas of dietetics. I started out in a hospital. I ended up in retail as well. And, I think being a dietitian is the right fit for me because people would call me a foodie. So I'm very passionate about food. I love to cook and bake. I love to eat, and I like to share food with my friends and family. So really kind of a fitting job for me, I think. My philosophy is I believe having a positive relationship with food is key to living a happy and healthy life. This is very important to me as a dietitian and as a person, and it's also a value that I try to instill in my clients when they work with me. And when I don't have my dietitian hat on, I also enjoy hiking. In fact, I was at Bundy National Park this past weekend, just in nature. It was wonderful. And I enjoy playing ultimate frisbee, but with Moncton being in the orange phase again, this one's gonna have to wait for a little bit longer. So that's a little bit about me. Just want to do a quick little disclaimer before we get started. I will just provide general information on nutrition and mindful eating today. I'm not going to provide any personalized nutrition advice. And because this is, virtual, and obviously there are people from a little bit all around, I can't do any individual or personalized counseling. But if you do need some more personalized advice, I always recommend speaking to your healthcare provider or reaching out to me after the session. And, I'd be happy to discuss some other options with you. Oh, that last little bit obviously does not apply. The session today is being recorded, like Claire mentioned, and will be available to view later on the website. Okay, so what we're really here to talk about today is mindful eating. And again, really accurate topic right now. With everything going on, 2020 has been a heck of a year up until now, and it's not even done. We may be experiencing all sorts of emotions and feelings, and our emotions and feelings are intertwined with our food or with what we eat. I often hear the phrase, food is medicine. But I don't fully agree with it because food is not just medicine. It's not just a bunch of nutrients that we consume that have an impact in our body. It's also very much social, and it's intertwined with our emotions. So this is where mindful eating can come into play. So I have a couple of things that I want to go over with you guys today. And I also want this to be, as interactive as possible. So even though we're not in person and we're all virtual, if you guys have questions or if you have comments, I encourage you to unmute yourself since we're such a small group, or if you prefer to just type in the chat box, I can also take a peek at that as we go through. If you want to type in any comments or questions, please do so. But we're going to start by going over some definitions, right? So what is mindful eating? I'm also going to talk about my mindful eating checklist with you. So what are some things that you want to remember or think about when you're practicing mindful eating at home? We're also going to do a little activity. So actually, before we get started, and I should have mentioned this earlier, If you want to participate in the activity, I would encourage you to grab a piece of food or a snack if you were thinking of having a snack earlier. So just, it could be an almond, it could be a raisin, an apple, it could be a piece of chocolate, whatever you have on hand, if you would like to participate. And later on, we'll go ahead and practice mindful eating together. If you don't want to, if you don't want to eat or you don't have any food on hand, that's fine. You can just kind of listen through and kind of think about how you would react at each step. So that works as well. And I'll finish off by talking about a few strategies as well. So how can you actually apply mindful eating at home? So I'm just going to make sure everybody's back at their screens. All right, I think everybody's back. Excellent. So I'm actually going to start by asking you guys a few questions, and you can just kind of silently reflect on these and think about your answers. So first off, when you eat, do you ever eat until you are overly full or until you feel sick or uncomfortable? I'm just seeing some people going like, yeah. And I will be the first one to say, I sometimes will do this as well. Do you ever find yourself maybe just grazing on food without really tasting it? Or do you ever not pay attention to the foods that you're eating because of distractions happening around? Maybe you're rushing through your meals, sitting at your desk, answering emails, and just kind of stuffing it all in, but not really paying attention to the food that you're eating. And having said that, do you ever have trouble remembering the taste, the smell, or the look of the meal that you've just eaten? Does that ever happen? If you answered yes to any or all of these, you may be eating mindlessly, the opposite of what we're going to be talking about today. Myself included, I've done this as well, and I'm a dietitian, right? So it is normal to do this sometimes, considering our busy lives, right? Meal times tend to be rushed and hectic sometimes, and mindless eating tends to be more common these days, now more than ever, now that everything is electronic and virtual. But the good news is mindful eating can help with this. So it's a very powerful tool that can help you break the habit of mindless eating. It can help you reconnect with your senses, become more aware of your hunger, your fullness, and help create a more positive relationship with food and with eating. So it may sound a little bit intense, but I promise you it's not complicated at all. You can actually start practicing mindful eating today. We're going to do it together later, but I'm going to share some strategies so that you can actually try and practice it later on and, throughout the rest of the week, the month, whatever. Okay. So let's start with the big question. What is it? What is mindful eating? You guys may have heard this term kind of floating around the internet. I'm just actually curious to know, what does everybody think when you hear the word mindful eating? What comes to mind? Feel free to unmute yourselves and let me know. I'm really curious.
Being aware of what we are eating.
Absolutely.
I think of like just sitting down with your meal and being conscious what it tastes like. Am I full yet? Listening to your hunger cues, stuff like that.
Absolutely. Definitely. Any other thoughts? There's no right or wrong answer.
I usually, being mindful of when I want to eat and why I want to eat it. My fridge is always empty though. I have to go and buy, as I guess my taste buds are going to tell me that I want to eat. I have bad habits though. I eat very late, and then it's usually around bedtime, so not good.
Okay.
I'm not being mindful. I'm being, I guess I listen to myself, but I'm not being mindful.
Okay. Well, I heard a lot of good things, a lot of keywords in all of your thoughts and your ideas. So really interesting to hear your thoughts there. And we're definitely going to dive a little bit deeper into this today. So when we think of mindful eating, we can think of mindfulness first and foremost, right? Mindfulness is a practice that comes from Buddhism. It's been around for a very long time, and it can be applied to all sorts of areas, right? Not just eating. If we think of mindfulness, we often think of like yoga and meditation, but it's not just that. It can also be applied to stress management. It can be applied to relationships, etc., etc. And of course, it can be applied to eating. So when we think of mindful eating, Bernice kind of said it, we can think of eating with awareness. Awareness is really the key word here. I also like to think of it as eating with intention and paying attention, right? You guys also said that, right? We're paying attention to our food. It's not just about paying attention to our food though, although that is a big part of it. And we all kind of think of that when we hear mindful eating. Okay, I'm going to eat and I'm going to pay attention to the food that I'm eating. It is partly about that, but it's also about paying attention to our thoughts, paying attention to our emotions, and the whole experience of eating and drinking. And we want to do so with curiosity, without posing judgment, and also with self-compassion. I think that's a very important part of mindful eating as well. In this day and age where diet culture is all around us, and where we get points for eating less or being skinnier, right? Not necessarily, we shouldn't be getting points for that regardless, right? But in this day and age, it's very important to have that non-judgmental and that self-compassion aspect when it comes to eating. So if we think of dive a little bit deeper in there, right? Mindful eating involves, like you guys mentioned, using all of our senses when we're eating, right? So this is going to help us consciously select and enjoy foods that are going to be good for our health, but also good for our emotional and physical hunger. So we're going to pay attention to the color, the smell, the texture, the flavors, the temperature of the food that we're eating, maybe even the sound that it makes when you put it in your mouth, right? We don't always do that. We don't always consciously think about all of those senses. So mindful eating will actually, take into consideration all of those senses while we're eating, kind of a full eating experience. It also involves acknowledging our physical and our emotional response that our body has when we see and when we eat food, right? So maybe I'll notice how my body is responding physically. Is my stomach grumbling? Or when we were talking about mindless eating, am I eating to the point that I feel overly stuffed? That would be kind of a physical response. But it's also important to acknowledge that emotional response. How do I feel while I'm eating as well? And we want to do so without posing judgment once again. Finally, mindful eating also involves developing awareness around our internal cues for hunger. So Rachel, I think you'd mentioned hunger and fullness cues, right? So we do have those built-in internal cues that we can try to be more aware of. A lot of us have overridden those over time. And mindful eating is about connecting or reconnecting with those hunger and fullness cues. But it's also about those external influences as well, right? So if you think about external things that may affect your hunger, what do you guys think about? What about advertising? Right? You turn on the TV and you see a commercial for, McDonald's hamburgers, right? Or fries, or pizza. Or what about that image at the beginning of the bowl of candy on the counter? You walk into a room and there's a bowl right there. Maybe you're not hungry for it, but it's there and it looks pretty. And I might have that, intention to reach for it and eat even though I'm not physically hungry. So there's lots of external factors that can influence our food choices and our eating habits as well. So mindful eating also involves paying attention or developing awareness around those external cues too. So we're paying attention to our food. We're also paying attention to our bodies and the way that it responds when we see and when we eat food as well. So what are some of the benefits now of mindful eating, right? We talked about what it is in general. What's all the hype though? Why is it so great, or why does everybody want to eat mindfully? Well, first off, it helps us understand our bodies better. We've been talking about hunger and satiety cues. We've been talking about how our body reacts to food. And we might not always notice this when we're eating, but if we're eating mindfully, it really makes us have to notice those things. So it allows us to be more attuned to what our body needs, not just what it wants, but also what it needs, right? If we're more attuned to our bodies, this may also help with overeating and undereating. So if we understand when our body is hungry and when it's satisfied, we may be less prone to eating too much or eating too little at our meals or snacks. If we're slowing down and eating slowly as well, this may improve digestion as well. So I do often get clients that come to me saying, you know, I just experience these stomach pains all the time. You know, my bowels are irregular. I've got all of these digestive issues. Mindful eating may be a strategy to help with this, right? If we're slowing down, this tends to be more gentle on our digestive system. Could be helpful for that. It may also help reduce cravings. And you know, oftentimes when we hear cravings, we're like, oh, I crave chocolate or I crave chips, right? What are your favorite or your biggest cravings when you crave something? What is it? Anybody want to share?
Chips.
Chips. Yeah, me too.
Takeout.
Takeout food. Mm-hmm.
Ice cream is my weakness.
Mm-hmm. Ice cream.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a good one. So, you know, why do we crave these foods? Oftentimes it's because we've labeled them as bad, right? We've labeled them as forbidden. So if we ditch those rules and the restrictive eating patterns and we stop labeling foods as good or bad, then they're no longer off limits. They're no longer on that pedestal. They're less interesting, less appealing. So we might not crave them as much, right? I always tell my clients too, you know, when we tell ourselves to stop eating something or that we can't have something, that's all we think about. That's all that we want. If I tell you not to think of a purple elephant, what do you think of? A purple elephant, right? So if we really remove those restrictions and those rules, it may help with those cravings as well. It may not right at the start, but eventually it will. Having said that, right, if we aren't labeling foods as good or bad, if we stop with those restrictive eating patterns with the dieting, it will help us enjoy food more. Eating will become a more pleasurable, guilt-free experience, right? Rather than a source of stress or anxiety. And finally, if we're, you know, eating this way, this may help better our relationship with food as well. So it may help improve our relationship so that we're eating healthier, we're making better food choices, we're eating in a more balanced way rather than a perfect way. Okay. Any questions up until now? If anything comes up, let me know for sure. If you can't, I know that we've got someone who can't speak as well. All right. Oh, I just noticed that Gail had mentioned, and I thought of what mindful eating was, and that was a good answer, Gail, as well. All right. So I'll keep checking the chat box too if you guys need to just type instead of speak as well. But for sure, those are some of the benefits, right, of mindful eating. Now, I've shared the benefits. We've talked about what mindful eating is. I'm sure you guys are all on board and you guys want to practice it, right? So we're going to go over our mindful eating checklist. What is it that we need to think about when we want to practice mindful eating. And again, a lot of you mentioned lots of keywords that I'm going to talk about right now. So when we're eating mindfully, we want to think about why we're eating. So I think Claire, you had mentioned that, right? Why am I eating? What's the reason behind it? When we eat is also important. What am I eating? I think that's probably the most common one, or the one we think about the most often. Where I'm eating, and finally, I would probably argue that this one is the most important. How am I eating? So we want to be thinking about all of these things as we're eating or as we're experiencing eating as well. So let's start with the why, right? So consider whether you're eating because you're hungry, or if it's because of another reason, right? Am I eating because food is linked to a specific activity, like going to the movies or a birthday party, a celebration? Or am I eating because I want to fill an emotional void, right? Or maybe I want to satisfy an emotional need, like relieving stress or boredom or loneliness, right? Am I eating because of those things? If we think about it though, most of the time we don't eat just because we're hungry. We eat based on our emotions. And what I want you to remember here is this is absolutely normal. We've kind of, with diet culture again, we've kind of grown to think that this is not normal and I shouldn't be eating based on my emotions. Emotional eating is bad. And it only becomes problematic when it happens too often. But there can be some positives to this as well. So think about mindful eating as, being aware of those reasons without posing judgment. If we understand why we're eating, then we can act in accordance with that and we can make choices for our health and our well-being. But we do need to identify that reason, especially if it's a more uncomfortable reason, like we talked about relieving stress or eating out of loneliness or boredom. Those are maybe more uncomfortable emotions, and we want to be able to face those rather than just hide them and hide them with food, basically. So that's the why, right? We want to be thinking about this every time that we take a bite. We also want to think about when we eat. Now, when we eat is more than just paying attention to the clock, okay? And I know that's when we think when, we think about, okay, what time am I eating, right? The specific time. Too often we do eat because it's mealtime though, right? 8 o'clock, it's breakfast time. 12 o'clock is lunchtime, 5 o'clock is supper time. It might be a little bit different for you or for everyone on the call, but oftentimes we base our meals on the clock. But consider this, okay? When you go to the bathroom, you don't stop and look at your watch and say, oh, it's too early, I can't go to the bathroom right now. I'll just wait until my usual time, right? You don't ever do that. When you go to the bathroom and you need to go, you go. So why do we base our meal times on the clock rather than on what our body is saying, what our body is feeling? Now, everybody's different ultimately, right? There's no one eating pattern that works for everyone. Ultimately, we want to eat so that we're arriving at meals hungry, but not starving. But that may be different for everyone, right? So consider how long it's been since your last meal, right? Has it been an hour? Has it been 30 minutes? Has it been 5 hours? And consider how your body is feeling, how your body's telling you if it's hungry or if it's not. And if your body is telling you that it's hungry, then we want to respond to that appropriately by eating to satisfy our needs and then kind of moving on, right? So again, it's when we're eating is not just about looking at the clock, but more about thinking about how long it's been since our last meal or our last snack, and thinking about how our body is responding to that. Next, we've got the what, right? What do I eat? So when you're choosing foods for a meal or for a snack, consider what it is that you're eating and try describing it with all of your senses, right? We talked about that earlier. We want to really use all of our senses while we're eating. You may also want to acknowledge where your food came from, right? How did it get to your plate? How was it made? We often don't think about this and take this for granted, right? When's the last time you told yourself when you were eating supper, where'd my chicken come from? Right? I wonder who prepared it, who made it possible for me to be able to eat chicken today. Don't say that, or we don't think about that very often. But doing this may mean that we're going to enjoy our food more, appreciate it more, and eat more mindfully. And then we also want to think about the where. So think about this. We're going to be more likely to focus on our food if we're eating in a place that is meant for eating. So a place that would be meant for eating, what would that be? Where do you guys eat usually?
At the table.
At the dinner table, right? Yes. Anywhere else?
That's what I was gonna say.
So dinner, what would be another place that you might eat that's not meant for eating?
Coffee
At my
table.
desk.
Desk, coffee table, in front of the television, right? I know I do that sometimes. I'm just like done for the day, go in front of the TV, right? It's happened before. But when we're eating in a place like that, or in the car, or at our desk, or on the go, we're not necessarily focusing on our food. And it's not possible to eat mindfully in that case, because we're focusing on maybe where we are or what we have to do next. So really sitting down at the lunch table, at the dinner table, in a cafeteria, those things may help with mindful eating as well. So choose an environment that is meant for eating as much as possible. And finally, the how, right? How you eat, super important. Think about, are you eating on autopilot, right? Just kind of bringing one bite after the next to your mouth, not really thinking about it. Are you multitasking, eating a granola bar, doing the laundry at the same time? Although I don't think we wouldn't want to mix those two things, right? The crumbs would get in the laundry, not great. Are you rushing through your meal, right? Are you just kind of really scarfing it down quickly because maybe you're eating at your desk and you've got another deadline that you need to meet? So whenever you're eating, think about, first off, if you're rushing, think about slowing down and savoring every bite. So take time to really notice how fast you're eating and how much you're eating. Readjust if need be, right? This may not always be possible. Again, we're living in really busy, hectic times these days, but whenever you can, take a moment, think about slowing down, taking a deep breath. And when you do have some extra time, then we can really think about all of these steps, all of these things, and really sit down and enjoy our meal. Okay, so just to recap, when we're enjoying a meal, we want to think about the why. Why am I eating? When am I eating? How long has it been since my last meal? What am I eating? I want to be using all of my senses. The where, if possible, we want to be eating in a place that's meant for eating. And finally, how am I eating? Am I eating fast? Am I doing something else at the same time? So we want to take into consideration all of those aspects. All right, so now is our time for activity. So if you've had the chance to go and grab a quick snack, and again, it doesn't need to be big, it can literally be a piece of cheese, an almond, a raisin, whatever. You can go ahead and grab that, and we're gonna do this little mindful eating activity. It should take about 5 minutes. So don't put your snack in your mouth, don't eat it right away. And I'm gonna take you through some steps. If you don't have a snack with you, that's fine. You can still listen in and think about how you would react if you were eating. And of course, because this is going to be recorded, you can always come back to the recording and do the activity later. So let's start. The first thing I want you to do is set yourself up in a comfortable seated position, okay? I'm gonna do it too. So take a moment to feel the weight of your body. Lift your chest So you're sitting up straight. And take a few deep breaths. Okay. So as you're breathing, relax the muscles in your face, in your shoulders, in your arms and hands. Relax your stomach muscles, your legs, and relax your feet. I know whenever I do this, I just feel so great afterwards. All right, so now we're all comfortably seated. We're grounded, we're present. Now I want you to take your snack. And before you begin to eat, you can look around your surroundings, take note of where you are. Maybe notice the light around you, notice the objects around you, and take a moment to just notice any thoughts that are running around in your head, any emotions, any sensations. Bring awareness to your breathing. Inhale, exhale for a few breaths. We can all do it together, actually. Just inhale and exhale. Now, take that piece of food and before putting it in your mouth, imagine that you're like an alien that landed from Mars. You've never seen anything like it, okay? What is it? What does it look like? Look at it closely. You can bring it up right to your eyes and take a moment to really silently describe your food. Try to use descriptive words that don't have anything to do with your opinion about the food, but really, what does it look like? Okay. Now you can feel the food in between your fingers as well. Move it around. Try to get a sense of its texture, of its mass and weight. Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it rigid? Is it soft? You can try to use those descriptive words to describe how it feels between your fingers as well. And now that you've done that, bring your food up to your nose and breathe in deeply. Smell it, right? How does it smell? And now you can maybe bring the food up to your ear. If it's small enough, move it between your fingers, right? Can you hear anything? What do you hear? What does that sound like? Try to use those descriptive words to describe that sound. And now you can put the food in your mouth or take a bite of it, but don't chew it. Just put it in your mouth and let it roll around in your tongue. Notice how your body responds to that. Maybe put it between your teeth. Don't bite it. Notice if you start salivating, right? That's a normal response that your body has to food. Try to describe that texture. Can you tell what that texture is in your mouth, on your tongue? So now that you've kind of experienced that food in your mouth, you can take a bite. Try to take one bite and see how it tastes. And then chew multiple times, really slowly. Try to slow down and notice how your body feels as you're chewing the food. Just take a minute and think about what you're eating, how it actually got to you, right? Where did it come from? How was it made? Question yourself about that. If you haven't already swallowed your food, you can do so. Notice any sensations as the food makes its way down to your stomach. And if you like, if you have more, you can repeat the process. And just take a few moments to feel gratitude for the food that you're eating and everything that made it possible. everything everybody's chewing. So that was our little activity. So it just shows how mindful eating is much more than just about the food that we're eating, right? We're really bringing awareness. We're using all of our senses, enjoying food without judgment or guilt. What did you guys eat? I saw, Bernice, you had an apple.
Mm-hmm.
I had, this was just on my nightstand, these coconut clusters.
Oh, very nice choice for a mindful eating activity.
I virtually took a bite from an apple.
There you go. I
That's
usually
so
like to do this with chocolate when I'm doing it.
That's out there in the fridge. But I like the visioning of the way you explained it. I really like that. And I guess I get the sense of it as well. Then I saw Bernice eating an apple. So
Kind of
but
pictured it.
yeah, but I sort of virtually, I visioned it, which I like the experience. I am going to get myself an apple and see what the benefits of doing this visioning is all about.
Excellent. So again, if you want to practice this again and you just kind of need those cues to go through each step, you can get this recording later. Or I would even encourage you to go on YouTube and YouTube mindful eating, potentially mindful eating activity. There's a really great 5-minute video on there that you can find that takes you through very similar steps. And it's just very relaxing, very informative as well. So if you do want to check that out, I highly encourage it. But really interesting to notice, right? Like sometimes we just eat so fast that we don't even taste or feel the food in our mouth. We maybe, just kind of scarfing down a meal or a snack and it's gone and we haven't even noticed, we haven't tasted. So this can be a really great way to slow down and take all of that into consideration. So the next time that you eat, whether it's at supper time or if you're going to eat a snack later this afternoon, I encourage you to really slow down, pay attention to the taste, the smell, color, texture of your food, even maybe the sound that it makes, right? We don't think about that very often, right? And I also want you to pay attention to how you feel as you're eating, right? If you're doing this, you may find that you're going to enjoy food a lot more. All right. So we talked about mindful eating. We talked about the benefits. We even practiced it in a lot of detail. And you don't have to eat mindfully this way all of the time. This could be very intense. And if we did this every time we ate, we would never finish our meal, right? So I'm going to give you some more strategies that you can use all together or separately to practice mindful eating at home. All right, so we're going to go through this kind of list, mindful eating versus mindless eating. And as we're going through, think maybe about what you do at home or what you do when you're eating and which category you fall into. So the first tip or strategy that I want to share with you is to eat without distractions. And I think we all know this one, right? But we don't always practice it. So of course, some distractions like, I don't know, a child screaming and having a meltdown because they don't want to eat their meal. That's kind of inevitable, right? You can't really go around that one, but we do have control over a lot of other distractions like the television, our cell phones or iPads or computers, even books or newspapers, right? Those could be considered distractions if we're doing those at the same time that we're eating, or if we're indulging in those at the same time that we're eating, right? Think about it. If you're reading a newspaper or if you're listening to the TV, then you're not really paying attention to the food that you're eating. So eating without distractions may interfere with our ability to feel satisfied after a meal, and that may potentially lead to overeating. So that could be probably one of the easiest things that we can do, one of the first things that we can do to practice mindful eating at home, right? Eating without those distractions. Now, Next on the list, I've got eat slowly. And I like this little mantra, pace, not race, right? We're not rabbits. We don't need to scarf down our meal. We can really eat slowly here. So take time to chew every bite and really savor your food. If you have difficulty with this, and I'll be the first one to say I do not always eat slowly, here are a couple of tips that you can try. So first off, maybe put your utensils down in between each bite. This will force you to eat slower, right? So take a bite, put your fork down, and just take a few moments to chew. You may also want to just pause and take a deep breath in between each bite. Right? You have to kind of stop for a moment to have that deep breathing exercise. So really pausing in between each bite can force you again to go slower. You may have also heard about chewing multiple times, and I did ask you throughout the activity to chew slowly multiple times. So consciously chewing multiple times before swallowing and doing this until it feels more natural may help as well. It might not feel natural to chew 15 or 20 times at first because we don't ever do that, or most of us don't practice this consciously. So doing that a couple of times per day, or maybe at most of your meals, may help slow down. Finally, if you eat with someone who is a slower eater, try matching their pace, right? So if they're eating slowly, look at their plate. Okay, maybe I'm just gonna put my fork down until we can kind of match or be at the same spot. So use somebody else as a guide who might be eating slower. And if you're eating alone, then maybe you want to just set a timer for yourself. So set a timer for 15, 20 minutes and see if you can stretch that meal. See how that feels to eat slower and stretch out that time. Again, this may not always be possible, but when it is, why not give it a try? All right, so that's for eating slowly. We also have be right here, right now. Again, this one could be difficult considering everything that's been going on in 2020, but being present during meal times, super important when it comes to mindful eating, right? So try to consider or bring awareness to, is your mind wandering anywhere while you're eating? Are you having any thoughts that are kind of running around your head? Or are you multitasking at meals? If you're multitasking and folding clothes, doing laundry, answering emails, we are not being present at our meal. Again, this may not always be possible because our lives are busy and hectic, but every bite counts when it comes to mindful eating. So try practicing this whenever you can. And I would say even, if you're at your desk and you're answering emails, think about, okay, stopping for a few moments, just taking a few deep breaths and paying attention to your food if you are eating at your desk that day. So this may help you, again, be more attuned to your hunger and satiety cues, or your hunger and fullness cues. Which brings me to my next point. Listen for those hunger cues. Our bodies have multiple ways of telling us when it's hungry and when it's satisfied. So stop eating when you do feel satisfied. Notice I didn't say when I'm full, okay? I said when I'm satisfied. And this is because it can take some time for your stomach to tell your brain that it's feeling full, to the point that if we wait until we're actually full, we may have overeaten. So try eating until you're 85% full, not 100% full, right? That would be more in the satisfied range, until I'm just content. Another thing we could say is eat according to how you feel, not according to your plate, right? So we tend to eat with our eyes, which is something that we need to kind of retrain ourselves not to do. So we don't need to eat until our plate is empty. We can eat until we feel satisfied. And again, this may take some practice. Next up, we've got resist judgment and lose the criticism. Again, I think this is probably the most difficult one to practice, especially as women. We tend to be very judgmental towards ourselves. So, just think about whether you're skinny or fat, whether you've exercised or not, it doesn't matter. You deserve and you need to eat every day. So what you eat one day will not make or break your health. It's not what you do once, it's what you do every day. So think about that as well when you're making food choices. Think also about those cravings that we talked about earlier. If we're restricting our food choices, if we're saying this is forbidden and I can't ever have it, it'll only make me want it more. So if you're eating a food that is maybe a little bit more indulgent, we talked about chips and ice cream and chocolate earlier, think about eating that food slowly and enjoying every bite. You may be satisfied with less. And also make sure that you enjoy that food without guilt, okay? If you do notice that you've got any negative thoughts that are creeping around in your head as you eat that bowl of ice cream or that bowl of chips, maybe think about journaling those thoughts, writing them down. That's usually when we make really good connections and that we can identify what the actual problem is, which is not the food. All right, up next we've got taste each bite before taking the next one. And this can be very helpful when we're eating more indulgent foods as well. So we really want to enjoy every nuanced flavor, and this may actually help you feel more satisfied with less and feel more pleasure at your meals, right? Ask yourself, does the food taste good? Sometimes we romanticize foods, especially indulgent or dessert foods, right? We take a piece of cake, for instance. We build it up in our heads that it's going to be amazing when we eat it. And then maybe when we take the first bite, it's not as great as I thought. And that is okay. And if it's not as good as you thought and you don't enjoy it, then you don't need to finish it, right? So we need to remember that as well. But the opposite is also okay. If you take that first bite and it's amazing and you love it and you want to take another one, that's fine as well, right? So remember to enjoy your food too. You may also ask yourself, is the taste changing as you take each bite? The second, the third, the fourth, the fifth bite. Sometimes our bodies kind of have this hunger cue where the first bite is amazing, but as we go along, it doesn't taste as great. That is actually a sign that your body is saying, I'm satisfied. I don't need any more. Right? So think about that, right? Is that first bite as enjoyable and as pleasurable as the first one? If not, you may be satisfied and you may be able to stop here. Finally, the last one in here, do an emotional check-in. What am I feeling right now? So I encourage you to do this at the beginning of your meal before you take your first bite, in the middle or during your meal sometime, and then again at the end. So think about how you're feeling. Are you feeling happy, or are you feeling stressed, anxious, guilty about what you just ate? How is that going to impact your eating? Okay. If your emotions prevent you from enjoying your food, what can you do to address that? This may be different for everybody, right? Maybe we want to take a couple seconds to take a few deep breaths, think about it. Maybe, again, we want to journal our thoughts to kind of make those connections. Maybe we want to talk about it to a friend or to another professional, right? To kind of go over some strategies for that. But really important to kind of check in emotionally throughout the entire eating process. Couple of other strategies that I want to give you here. The first one is to pick one meal or one snack to practice with. So again, mindful eating may not feel super normal at first. It feels really strange. I'm sure as we were doing that activity together that you were thinking, oh my God, like this is taking long, or this is feeling weird. And that's absolutely normal. But we may want to practice it little by little, small baby steps at a time to eventually get to the point where it feels more natural, where it becomes more of second nature or more of a habit. For example, for me, practicing mindful eating at breakfast time, probably not the best time, because usually I'm super busy, I'm running out the door, I need to get 1,001 things done. So I'm not going to be really mindful at breakfast, but at supper time, I'm more relaxed. It's slower paced. I have more time to enjoy my food. So this would probably be a better time for me to practice. Plus, I'm eating with someone else. You know, I'm eating at home with my fiance, so we can kind of talk about it. I can try to describe my food to my fiance, so we can kind of both practice it at the same time. This could be a better time for me to practice mindful eating. And remember, every bite counts. So even if it's not at a meal, even if you're doing this with a snack throughout the day, this can be beneficial too. Once you practice it more, again, those skills will become more natural. It's going to infuse with your other meals and snacks. It's going to become second nature. Next on the list here, I've got be a wine taster. So most of you are probably looking at me with big question mark on your face. So I don't mean actually drinking wine, although that can be a part of mindful eating too. But what I want you to do here is pretend that you're kind of one of those snooty wine tasters, right? So think of how a wine taster will take their glass and they're going to swirl their wine, then they're going to stuff their nose in and they're going to smell the bouquet, and they're going to swish their wine in their mouth to kind of really pick apart each individual flavor. You know how those wine tasters will do that? So you don't have to do it that intense with every meal, but if you can you wine taste a few bites of your meal, right? Can you really take the time to pick apart the texture, the taste, the temperature, use all of those senses that we talked about for a few bites at your meal? Maybe you want to make a point to really describe what you're experiencing or what you're tasting to someone else or to yourself if you're eating alone once in a while, just to see if you can be that snooty wine taster, right? Or if you can do like a snooty wine taster. And next on the list, we've got create a pleasant atmosphere, especially if you're eating alone, right? This can really be helpful to making your meals more enjoyable. Maybe you want to listen to your favorite music, dim the lights, take out the nice cutlery. Maybe you want to light a couple of candles, right? So those things can all help you enjoy your meal and really focus on your food, rather than if we're eating in a really poorly lit place, it's not really enjoyable. I just kind of want to eat and get out, right? So if you can, whenever you're able to, try to create that pleasant atmosphere. And again, we were talking about eating with company earlier. This can also help create a pleasant atmosphere as well. Maybe you want to do a Zoom meeting with someone else at dinner time. We did say, you know, eating in front of a screen, not the best, but if you're eating with someone else in front of the screen, I think that would be reasonable enough. Or if you're able to eat with somebody in your bubble during this time, really foster conversation, enjoy everybody or each other's company. Again, this may help you enjoy your food more. And last but not least on the list, we've got be kind to yourself. So remember, it's okay for mindful eating to look different from day to day, meal to meal. Sometimes it'll look great. You're going to slowly enjoy and savor your meal. You're going to be really proud of yourself for maybe going through all of those steps. And other times, you won't really have a lot of time to eat mindfully. Maybe mindful eating for you that day will look like just a mindful pause, right? Just taking a few deep breaths to slow down, think about everything, your emotions, the way that you're eating, and then kind of moving on because you're rushed. And that is okay, right? Maybe some days you're still going to eat past your fullness cues. You're still probably going to eat sometimes to the point that you feel uncomfortable. Think about Thanksgiving turkey dinner we might have had this past weekend. But other times you'll also be really proud of yourself for listening to your body and stopping when you're satisfied. And that's great. Think of everything as a learning experience, and don't beat yourself up for not eating mindfully 100% of the time. okay? We're not looking for perfection, we're looking for improvement. So every bite, every little bit will definitely count here. All right, so in summary, just to kind of recap on everything, mindful eating means eating with awareness or eating with intention and paying attention to your food, to your emotions, the way that your body feels, the whole eating and drinking experience. When you're eating, try to think about the why, when, what, where, and how. You don't need to think about all of these things all of the time, but the more you can check off the list, the better. Try to start small, practice with one single meal or snack, gradually incorporate more of those skills as you go along, and finally be kind to yourself. We're not looking for that perfection, we're just looking for improvement. All right. So that was all I had for you guys this afternoon. I want to thank you guys for listening. It was a pleasure to be able to talk a bit about mindful eating, especially since this is something that I'm trying to improve upon myself. I love to share all of my learnings with other people as well. If you have any questions, you can definitely ask them right now. Or if something comes up later on, you can reach me by email at vguitar.nutrition@gmail.com. I'd be happy to definitely answer any of the questions that you may have or point you towards some of my other services. So I'll just stop sharing my screen at this point.